live streaming it.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ellen. I am the secretary of the Lake George Historical, and welcome to our museum located at 290 Canada Street. Tonight we have Margy Mannix. Margy Mannix is a Lake George kid, as those of us who are Lake George kids say. She's a graduate of Lake George High School. She graduated from Boston University with a degree in PR. She and her partner have a photo business, and they travel all over taking photos of sporting events. And that's a pretty good job, I'd say. And tonight, Margy will speak on the Road to Lake George, which is the west side of the lake, which is here behind you. So let's welcome Margy, and thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everyone. My presentation started with an oral history interview I did with Jack Abrams. He grew up in Glens Falls, but his family had a summer business in Lake George. And he is still around. He's pushing 90. And he said, I want to take you down memory lane. And I'm going to take you up from 149 up the road to Lake George. I said, all right. So I sat with him, and he pointed out a lot of things I didn't know. Some of the things I do know. So welcome, and here we go. Let me just make sure I know which button I'm pushing. All right. We'll start at the intersection of 149 and Route 9. Down in the town of Queensbury, just below the Lake George line. The halfway house was started by George Brown, 1849, and he ran a very successful inn. And it was called the halfway house because they determined that it was halfway between New York City and Montreal. And let's see if this thing works. Up here, the halfway house, this is Route 149 coming into what is now Route 9. And there are two, you can see two roads, and that's part of the what do I want to say? The military road. There was a high road and a low road from the old military road, and that is part showing that there. So the halfway house was burned down in May of 1946, and what's there now is the shoe store. And if anybody wants to, audience participation is welcome. Going north, the Mohican Motel has been there for 50 years, easily. Owned by George and Marilyn Stark after they purchased it from Lou and Fran Cuddleback. And this sign is still here. Old sign and old postcard. The Gourmet Restaurant, people remember, also a victim of the fire. The Russo family opened in 1958 by Ralph Russo and his wife Joanne. It burned in August of 1971. And the Ponderosa was a car hop snack bar that was right next to it. When I talked to his son, Ralph, who works at the Log Jam for many years, he reminded me of the Ponderosa, and I didn't even remember it. But the Gourmet was a very popular eating spot on Route 9. It's sat where it's Leo's Lobster on Route 9. I think it's a little bit farther south of that. There's that the buildings aren't doing anything now. I don't think they're just kind of laying idle along Route 9. They didn't rebuild. The Russo family went and ran a restaurant down in the Mount Royal Plaza after that, after the fire. Now, I did cross Route 9 because we can't fail to mention the Indian teepee and the trading post. Sam Frost and his mother, McNary, Peggy McCandless was Sam's mother. They would go out in the wintertime and drive out to Arizona and buy Indian artifacts and Indian jewelry and set up their shop and their wares. And once they learned that the Northway was coming in, they decided that traffic was not going to travel on Route 9 any longer, so they bought the Tom Tom shop, or they started the Tom Tom shop, which is still operating in the village today. Now, the Hermitage was nestled in Route 9 along the hill before the Northway came. I don't remember it. Does anybody here remember it? I don't. But 1961, it was demolished to make way for the Northway. It was on the west side of the road, Route 9 going north, and it was a very popular spot. Prime rib dinner for $3.50. That was, from what I understand, it was set into the hillside where the pull-off north of Leo's Lobster. There's a little historical pull-off in there. I think it was in there, right along that road, the Glens Falls Lake George Road. Now, the Tall Pines Motel is still there, and we're going north on Route 9, and it was originally owned by the Chambers family. They owned 300 acres on both sides of the road. I spoke with her grandson, and he said that her house had burned across where Maltby's Chevrolet is, or it's not Maltby's any longer, but she owned all the way up the mountain into French Mountain, and then there's the Capels owning. We were talking about it a little earlier. They ran it for many years, and now Alan Chambers is the grandson of the original owner. So that's still there. And then just north of that, where the King Hendricks Motor Court is, was one of our first drive-ins. The Lake George Drive-In, and the Colonel Williams Motel on the flat land. So when you're driving by that motel, you can kind of picture that it was a good spot for a drive-in movie theater, because it's a really nice flat expanse of the property with the tall pines behind it. They had a live monkey cage too, which would have been a lot of fun. And that operated for, I think, into the early 50s. So where the Lake George Auto Marine is, across from Bloody Pond, for those of you who are familiar with that little building, that had many lives. It was the Royal Pines, the House of Guy, and Panthy's. And I think Jack Abrams, my oral history mentor, worked at Panthy's for many years. And I don't remember any of it. But in 1950, it sold at auction for $12,500. So it was first the Royal Pines, then the House of Guy, which was Chinese American, and then Panthy's until 1974. Then going across the street again to the east side, just north of the Bloody Pond, was Kaiser's, and now it's It was Sushi Oshi, but now it's the Fang Bistro. And the people that owned Kaiser's, they were skiers. So when I was looking through the information, they would have ski club meetings at their restaurant, and they'd go off on ski trips, Whiteface and Killington, and everybody had New Year's parties and dancing and music. Then coming farther north up on the hill, the George Washington and the King George, these motels are still there, but different names now. The Brass Monkey, a lot of people remember the Brass Monkey Lounge in the King George Motor Inn. And you can see what a beautiful view they had from up above, up on the hill. And those motels are still there. Just gonna grab a sip of water. The old trading post. This was located where Goonie Golf is now. Another victim of a fire. Trading post here to the old trading post here, and then the Lottenbachers, or the Bohms, had a restaurant in Ballston Spa, and they ran it until the fire in 1959, I believe. Do you remember that, Jerry? Yeah. I couldn't find that picture of it anywhere. And then the Fort Gage Motel, Fort Gage Cabins. This says originally all the land along the west side of what is now Route 9, from the Fort Gage Cabins at the Luzerne Road to Birch Avenue, which is down across from the Lake George Forum, was owned by the late Udney West. It was referred to as the West Farm. It was originally 120 acres, went on both sides of the road. The electric railway ran directly through the heart of the property. And old timers recall that in 1911, Fort Gage Cabins was the first auto camp started in Lake George. Then, moving north, the Rainbow Lodge, which is now Mama Risso's. The building looks, you can see where a lot of the same building is here with additions on either end. And the phone number, I think, is still the same. Then we'll move north to Howard Johnson's. Fish fry, all you can eat. That was 1952. Right, Rachel Ray worked there. The DeSantis family started it, and it was the last one standing in the US of A. Our last Hojo's. Everybody's sad to see it now a sushi bar or sushi place, right? Chinese food. So then the next property north was originally the Northland Lodge, which also started by the DeSantises. It was a Finch Prime Company building, a build. And now it's the Super 8 Motel owned by the Crescito family. And then coming a little farther north, we had a Dairy Queen, which we no longer have. And I believe that building is now, it was Joe T, but it's not open and it's for sale. So if anybody wants to buy it and start a new Dairy Queen, we could use one. And a lot of these pictures, another thing that prompted me to create this presentation was a photo album up in the historian's office that Mrs. Chuck Hawley, Ruth Hawley, compiled. She took pictures. A lot of these pictures are hers. She took in 1977, 1978 in November. That's why there's snow. But she went up and down the road and really did a good job in cataloging what was there at the time. So hats off to Mrs. Hawley. Then the Holly Tree Inn, which is now the Legacy, and Tommy's Steak and Stein, which was the Waterkeeper's house there, and now I believe the Fort William Henry bought that little motel complex and are housing their employees there. Yeah, it's now the Legacy Inn. And then the Prospect Mountain Diner, the Patna, the original diner from New Jersey. Philip Patna purchased it and had it located on the corner where the Waterslide World was, movie theater was. And then when the state wanted to widen Route 9, he moved it over to the bowling alley property in 1967. And then then Art Leonard bought it and started the rickshaw adjoining it. And Prospect Mountain Diner is still there. The Lake George Bowl is next, going north. That was, the bowling alley was operated in 1961 by Marshall Hancock. And in 1967, the Prospect Mountain Diner moved to the property. And Art Leonard and Bob Blaze were partners in the bowl until they sold it in 1984. And then George's Gulf. That property is still a gas station. It's changed hands a few times. That's one of Mrs. Hawley's pictures. And it's still, I think it's Sunoco now, just below the bowling alley. Then the Holiday Inn opened in June of 1966. And Harold Veeder developed and opened the resort as a year-round resort, catering to all 4 seasons. And now it's owned by the Cressito family. It was the first original town, village, town dump. That's right. And it was also Art Gillette, who started Magic Forest, had a Santa's Christmas Village there for a bit before he started over and built Magic Forest. And these 2 buildings are still there. Blake Veeder is now the Lake George Bait Shop, and Oma Pizza is now the French bakery. They've just a French woman actually remodeled the whole building and has started a bakery bistro. Breakfast and lunch. Then Sky Harbor, the only upstairs and downstairs cocktail lounge. It's a motel now and the bar is gone. And I think there's action in the works that it's going to change hands soon. So that will be a good thing. Then moving north again, the Montcalm was there for many years, then the Westbrook Steakhouse, and now it's the High Peaks Distillery and Biscotti Brothers. That building's still there, and it's changed hands and done a bunch of different things, restaurant-wise. 1978, we're talking almost 50 years, almost. Then the OTB was OTB, and then it was the Lemon Peel. You remember that? You had some good times there, I can tell. Skippy and the Pistons. And then just north of that was John's Piano Lounge, started by, right here, and the Turkey House Restaurant, which I don't remember, sat back from the road that was basically behind in the parking lot where the High Peaks Distillery parking lot is, the Turkey House Restaurant, and John's Piano Lounge. They had a bar with a piano right in it, and you could sit around. Do you remember that? Anybody here remember that? I don't. You could sit and listen at the pianos. Classy, a classy place. What's that? We're not quite in the village. We're across from Gaslight Village property still. We haven't crossed Westbrook yet because the next slide, this is on the other side of the Westbrook. And John Palmer, who started John's Piano Lounge, built the Fort Deli Superette and the liquor store. The Palmer family lived above the liquor store, and now where the Superette was is now the Adirondack Brewery. That building is still underneath all his facade that he's constructed around it. So that was 1969, and Jack Abrams said he worked there in the gift shop there. Then coming up the hill, Thompson's, Esso, and he had a car dealership there as well. And now what's there is Quirks. Has a boatyard there. Gas station's gone. So that's 60 years ago. Then Shell World, started by Arthur Jones, opened in 1963 across the street from the Fort William Henry. And it was first started as a coffee shop and gift shop before turning it into a shell shop. I believe they went to Florida in the winter and had to bring back shells. When he decided he was going to create the Goonie Golf, mini golf, he brought his gift shop with him, and now he has Gift World and Goonie Golf on the corner of the Luzerne Road and Route 9. And Goonie Golf just celebrated 50 years. Last summer, the summer before last. The Trading Post restaurant. There was a restaurant that was set back into the hill. I don't have a picture of it. I've looked everywhere. I can't find one. It was a restaurant. I want somebody to come up with a photo for me. So Ingle Lodge is the next property north, which is now where the Quality Inn is. Frank Cotton was the mayor from 1950 to 1959, and he owned and operated the Ingle Lodge. And I think when I got out of high school, it was still there, and the cabins he had turned, or whoever owned it at the time, turned it into like craft shop cabins that were all in the back. And then now it's the Quality Inn. So Wade's, these girls were having fun way back then, I can tell. The Pancake House now. Let's see, it was once a rooming house, then Wade's, and now it's a Pancake House, but they're not open. So I think that's in the works of changing hands too. I'm not really sure, but it hasn't operated. I know, they should open it. Pancake House, yep. Painted blue. It's blue. So that's on the corner of Mohegan and Canada Street, Route 9. Then we have the Jolly Roger. This building, it was first Johnny Romeo's. He played the accordion. Johnny Romeo played the accordion, and he drew a large crowd from the Capital District. And they sold it in 1971 to make room for the expansion of Shepherd Park, because this building sat down here on the corner of Shepherd Park, and so they moved part of it up here, and then it was Jolly Roger for a while, and then it became Zachary's, and now it's the Lobster Pot. But the stone wall and the staircase, that all still exists out front. And then we have DJs and Papa Wows, and you can see the winter pictures. These are Mrs. Hawley's pictures. She was keeping track of what was going on. Papa Wows was a restaurant where they sold hot dogs steamed in beer and draft beer. Earlier in its history, it was the Stewart Arms and another little rooming house here. But these buildings still exist. You can see the windows here and the windows here. It's kind of all the same. They put this mansard deck on. And now Papa Wow's Gaslight is a restaurant that's sitting there now. And DJ's is still operating as a disco or live music. And they, of course, have expanded too and changed their facade, but still in the same family. Then looking, if you were standing in front of the Stewart Arms, here's their sign here, and looking north, this is 1928. Cars are heading south on Route 9, and the Silvercrest was right here where Earl's Garage was next. So 1939 was that fire. Lots of buildings burned here in Lake George. And then Dr. Lederer's building was here. He was from the Eastern Europe, I think, from what I understand. And he was open all summer long. You could just walk in and he would take care of you. And his property turned into what became McDonald's. And I think we had the only McDonald's in the country that would close in the winter. And then it's gone. We don't have it. Now it's just a vacant parking lot, right? And then on the corner of McGillis and Route 9, J.R. Earl and Son was there for many a years. It was a Shell gas station and a car dealership and a hardware store. And this picture was taken from the roof of the hardware store, looking at the busy, when we had police directing traffic. And now it's the Gyro Hut. And it was a wax museum for a while too. 1998, this was, yeah, a shirt shop. Then across the street, you remember Bertie and Dave's? I don't. I remember Benedict Arnold's was there. That was the last thing that burned. And now it's the Fun World arcade on the corner of McGillis and Canada Street. So it went through a lot of iterations. Kylie's Coffee Shop, Cafe Gardens, Bertie and Dave's, Golden 20s, Benedict Arnold's, Fun World. So here's a shot of the village looking north. You can see, well, liquor store, Wallerstein's liquor store was here, the Lake George Garage, Herm Murray's Arcade was up here. You can see there was a little gift shop, and the Lake Theater is up here. So going back a lot of years. Then where most of us remember Lang's Pharmacy, which is not there any longer. That's Riley's gift shop now. Julie's Delicatessen, Vera's Luncheonette, all in this section of our little village just north of Bertie and Dave's. Then the Lake Theater started in 1929, then it burned, and Mrs. Carpenter, who owned that property, she wanted a fireproof building. So they built it back with brick and block. So, and I just learned that my grandfather designed the building, Arthur Mannix. And it was a movie house and theater for many years. And some of the community members wanted to revive it to make an art center, but that never happened. So moving north again, that was the Maynard Hotel. That was just above the Lake Theater, owned by Mrs. Carpenter. It was a Carpenter house first, and then the Maynard Hotel. And then when that burned in 1957, it made way for the Maynard Center, which is the storefront that goes back away from Canada Street. The stores go up and back. And our 4th and 5th grade classrooms were in there for a number of years until they built the elementary school. And the Tom Tom shop, this is where the Frost family moved their location, their gift shop, away from the teepee trading post down on Route 9 because the Northway was coming through, and they figured everybody would avoid traveling on Route 9 and just come to Lake George Village. Oh, all right. You were a top Florida and New York hairstylist. Yeah, were you at the Maynard Center? At the Maynard Center?
No, actually, I worked when it was next to Sears, and then I managed another shop he opened. It was called Luciani's.
Oh, all right. Great. Montgomery Ward, okay. And the Endless Summer Shop, you remember that, probably. So just north of the Maynard Center, these are old pictures of the St. James block, which they called it, which I learned by putting this together. And those buildings are still there. Patty Kirkpatrick now has Nina's Sweet Shop and Hello Sunshine in there. And the stores have evolved. There's been lots of different store in the storefront. But you can see the trolley line going through the village here, and that was until 1926, I believe. The St. James block. 1927. Yep, Delavan Hotel is here. All right, so the electric trolley ran till 1927. So here are some other pictures of that same block building. Muratori's had a shoe store here. Phil's Diner. Caramel Corn Shop, we all remember that. And I guess there was a piano person right in the window would play for Phil's. You do remember that? All right, good.
There was a guy who had big guy who turned out he was Fats Domino back in the 50s.
Really?
So I am there. That's his name.
There's a bit of history. Fats Domino played at the
I still do this.
Bill's Lounge. That's interesting. I'll have to talk to Patty. And here's our high school band. Jerry, you're probably here. Oh, marching. Next, La Casa, one of our favorite restaurants. It's no longer there. Now it's the Christmas tree shop. And Harry Cohen's Lake George Sports Shop was right next door. Those buildings are still there. Then the Delavan coming in. Yep. That's been there a long time. It was the first tavern to open in the village after Prohibition was lifted. Had many proprietors. Paul Robinson was one. Marty Luttrell, didn't they own it? The Bentley family owned it for a while. And the mayor, old Mayor Blaze, he said that was his first. He had a room upstairs when he first moved to Lake George. And it burned in 1987. And now it's another block t-shirt building. And then where the House of Frankenstein now sits was the house my grandmother was born in 1906. Her grandmother bought the house or built the house, I'm not sure, but they lived there until they sold out to the House of Frankenstein. So House of Frankenstein's been there 50 years. And Malcolm had a plumbing business there out in the back on the alley. Right? I remember that. Then next up here, Dell's Chicken House. That's where Capri Pizza is now. The Village Brasserie is the village shop or something, t-shirts. And there was a game room here, and Coffee and was here. And then the Lake George Diner, Zeke's Diner. It was the Trailways bus stop. And now it's Leonelli's Arcade on the corner. But it was the place to go after school. Have a soda and a whatever. And Sorge's wasn't on Route 9. It was just half a block back behind Zeke's. Now it's incorporated into that property is incorporated into the Leonelli's Arcade on Montcalm Street. And then Bob Wilcox had a soda bar where it's now Cafe Vero, but it's had a lot of iterations in between, La Roma, and then Gino and Tony's, and now it's Cafe Vero. A lot of changes, but they're still keeping this window effect. It's still there. Then moving up to Lucille's, which is now Monte Cristo's. Lucille Patnod, I believe. Yep, she was a proprietor for 23 years. And now it's Monte Cristo's. J.C. Montana's, after Trattoria's. These were all private homes at one point, and then they started getting sold off to businesses. So the Mushroom Tree turned into Dillygaff. We're basically across the street over here now. Now Trattoria Siciliana was, then it turned to J.C. Montana's, then it closed, and now it's Mezzaluna, I believe. My high-tech guy. Then we had a bookshop till it burned in 1984. Poor Richard's Bookshop. Some of us remember that. And there was a coffee shop in there as well. And that was a private home, too. The who? Oh, okay. Thatcher Family Home. Okay. Thank you. Then Parker's Spinning Wheel, which is basically across the street right now. It's for sale almost. I heard that it's it's a done deal, is it? Good. That's good. I know the family will be happy. That's good. Do you know what they're planning on doing with it? Okay. Good. That's good. Oh, all right. Well, that Dr. Henry, well, yeah, he had this building, and then they built this building, and he had his dentist office was in the back. The one I can't hear you. Oh, that's the next one. That's the olive oil building. That is this one. Wasn't it? Oops, whoops, where am I? Up here. This was Janet Vito's boutique, which this is the olive oil company now. We're right across the street. Okay. Do I remember that? No, I don't. But upstairs, yeah, there was a law office up there. You remember that? Do you remember that? Okay, good. We're remembering. Right, it was a law office. I need all the help I can get. Say that again? Of this one. Okay. So, but that's Parker's store, isn't it? Yes. Isn't that this one? This one. The spinning wheel. Yes, I think so. This one. Yeah. Okay, same building. Yep. All right. So now we'll move a little bit further north to the Lake George Hotel, which was the Warden at one point, and now we're directly across the street from here. And that burned in a massive fire in October of 1978. I remember standing on the front lawn of this building, the courthouse lawn, and you could just feel the flames. It was so hot. It was, yeah, it was a horrible fire. But they saved the building next door. That was one of the claims to fame for the fire department, that they were able to save this building here. Then it became George's Townhouse, and now it's owned by the Chilakis building or family, and they have the stores across the street. Then the next corner over here, across the street, was a gas station, Gulf service. Then it was Gulf for a while, and then gas tanks removed, and now it's a t-shirt shop. Another t-shirt shop. This has changed a little bit, but we're right across the street from where we are now. Right, there was, and I think that's what this is. I can't really read it. But yeah, it was an underage, non-alcohol dance club. And that was a good idea.
Bucky Prosser's mother was George O'Keeffe's housekeeper.
That's right, Margaret Prosser. That's right, Margaret Prosser was George O'Keeffe's housekeeper. Then right across the street again, Wager's Soda Fountain, and it was the Woodmere building. It's still called the Woodmere. There's apartments upstairs, and now it's owned by John Carr, the building, and he has rejuvenated the soda fountain in the same spot. Then moving farther north, we had the Sicilian Hayward's restaurant. It was the Idle Hour for a while.
That was the old Iroquois Lodge.
This was the old Iroquois Lodge. Then turned into Hayward's Restaurant. And then right next door is the Sicilian Spaghetti House. You can tell that these are all old homes that people are trying to make a business out of. Into. And these are all gone now to make way for the Marriott. And Giuseppe's is in there too. Then we have Barleycorns, which originally was the Marine Room here in 1965, in the early 60s. They had an outdoor cafe and restaurant, steakhouse. Then it turned into Barleycorns, which was there for many a year. Village hairstylist. Did you work there? That one, not that one. Okay. But this is all part of the Marriott property now, which is right over across the street. And here's System Court. We were talking about that earlier. The earliest cabin colony in the village, and their claim to fame was one of the earliest ones east of California, one of the earliest ones. And that also burned in, they built in 1925 by Mr. Henry Sisson. This claimed to be the first motor court east of California. Burned 12 of the 16 units in 1962. And this front one was there for a long time, remaining, and it was Millington's Law Office, and it sat there. It was painted blue, and it was right just north of the school. And then we'll end at the school for this one. It's a photo from 1957. And originally the first high school was in the property where TD Bank is. Now it's not TD Bank, it's Adirondack Trust next to the library. It was a big school until the early 20s. And then they decided they needed more room, and so they built across the street. And here you can see Parrott's barn up here. This is Parrott's property, the Parrott Farm. And Holly Drive going up here to Schuyler Heights. Mountain Drive and the baseball
Where's the golf course?
The golf course was in this property here after after the Northway, because they moved the Parrott House to Schuyler Heights, still sitting there below the town hall and the village hall. And
Alex Murtry built the golf course.
right,
His wife is a Parrott.
right, Lee Parrott. She was one of his daughters from his second wife. So that's my show for this evening. Yes.
Why on earth did they put the school in the middle of all of this? When there's so much, there's a lot of vacant land back then. Why? I never understood why they, first of all, valued
Put it right in the middle of the village. That's a very good question.
Well, so the kids could walk to school from this.
Really? So the kids could walk to school?
They sent to school, and they also came from other areas.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe somebody donated the land. That's a very good question. I'll have to look into that. Because they had the property here. It was a big 2-story schoolhouse on this side of the street. And I don't know. That's a very good question. I don't have the answer.
You could walk to school.
Yeah. I wanted my mother to drive me.
I walk to school for your.
All right, does anybody have any questions? That's the show for the time here.
Were all the kids raised in that school at one point?
They were. And then the classes started getting bigger, and I went to kindergarten through second grade there. Third grade for my class. I'm celebrating my 50th high school reunion this year. Third grade was in the bus garage, where it's now the bus garage. There was 3 classrooms. And then 4th and 5th were in the Maillard Center. And 6th was in the hardware store and the Oddfellows. And then the year that I went to 7th grade, the elementary school opened.
Did you say Oddfellows? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where was that?
On Tom Street. There was the Lake George hardware store and the Oddfellows Hall. Still there. The building's still there. 6th grade. Yep. Mrs. Fordyce and Mr. Corsetti, he just started like a couple years before I was in 6th grade. And Mrs. Fordyce and Mr. Blair. Right? You were there.
Yeah, I remember when I was going to come up I was in Glens Falls, and I was going to come up, and they said, you're going to go to school here. This is going to be your classroom. And I said, I'm going to go to class in the building front. Like, I didn't even understand what was going on. That's.
You said, no, I'll wait till 7th grade. All right, well, thank you for coming, and I appreciate the audience, and thanks for the input. You taught me some things as well, so I appreciate you coming.
Thank you all very much for stopping in. And if you have questions for Margy, or if you have questions for us, who might know some stuff, please
Feel
ask.
free. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you very, very much.
Did you learn about your grandfather building that building while you were working on this project? Is that when you...
Yes. Yeah. I know. Hi.